Okay, so welcome everybody to the final clip in this riding around Launceston on the Bergman 650 Suzuki scooter, riding around residential suburbs in the southwest of Launceston to start off with. This area here is called Prospect, and then I'll just be riding around various other suburbs. Somewhat aimlessly it might appear, but there was a purpose to what I was doing. While I'm talking, you can get a view of some of the residential suburbs of Launceston and some of the landscape of Launceston. And if you're not particularly enjoying the commentary, then hopefully the scenery will be of interest to you at least. In this clip, I am going to talk about electric vehicles again. I've talked about these a few times, but I'm going to do it again. So I should say at the outset here, I don't own an electric vehicle. I've never driven an electric vehicle. I have no shares in any company or any financial or other interest in any company that makes, imports or sells any brand or model of electric vehicle, and I'm not trying to sell you one. I'm simply making some observations and talking about electric vehicles in general. And if I mention a particular brand at any point, it's not to endorse it or to disendorse it. I simply don't know enough about any vehicle to make that. It's just to use that vehicle to illustrate a point. So with all that said, let me get into what it is I want to say. And if you've decided you've got to the point where you don't want to hear me talk about electric vehicles, then just turn the volume down and enjoy the scenery. If you have a comment that you'd like to make, then put in the comments at the bottom in the appropriate space at the end of the video, and when I become aware of it, I will respond. I think it's, as a starting point for what I want to say, I think it's a reasonable thing to say that there is almost nothing, in fact probably there is nothing that human beings make, including more of themselves, that doesn't have some impact on the environment. There is no such thing as an environmentally neutral thing. You can say, a manufacturer can say to you, well, we use recycled materials or we reuse things, and that's good. But nevertheless, that even reusing and recycling still has its impact on the environment. So there are no things that humans make that are environmentally neutral. Everything has an impact on the environment. And electric vehicles have an impact on the environment in some positive ways and in some negative ways. And so the positive ways are the things that I will talk about first of all. And remember, I'm not trying to sell you one or endorse one. I'm just stating what I think are facts and what are things that are not in dispute. And you can make of that what you will. So there are two ways that I can see that electric vehicles can and will make a positive impact on the environment. The first of those is that when electric vehicles reach a critical number, and I'm not sure what that would be, but when they reach the critical number, they will, over time, have an impact on the quality of the air in our heavily congested and densely populated urban environments. It is a fact that most people in Australia live on the east coast. There is a small pocket around Adelaide in South Australia and in the southwest corner of Western Australia, but for the most part, most people live in densely populated, highly congested cities along the east coast of Australia. Those population centres are characterised by kilometre after kilometre of roads. The proof that of more vehicles being on the road and the need to do more for those vehicles is a constant building of roads, tollways and tunnels by governments, but particularly in New South Wales and Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, the two biggest cities, the two most congested cities, the two most densely populated cities of Australia. Governments in both of those states, of whatever persuasion, are forever announcing a new tunnel or a new freeway or a new tollway or a new road because the population is increasing. When the population increases, more people need to get around, and even if they do their daily commute by public transport, they still in many cases want a car to get around and do things on the weekend. So the number of cars on our roads is increasing, and so the air in our cities is in some cases quite poor. The quality is quite poor, and we know there are all sorts of health issues related to poor air quality. people with emphysema, people with asthma, people with all sorts of lung conditions and breathing conditions. Those are exacerbated by the poor quality of the air in our cities. And it is a fact. When you drive an electric vehicle, there are no emissions at the tailpipe. And that's not to say there are no emissions involved in the production of the vehicle, but when you're driving your electric vehicle around day to day, nothing's coming out of the tailpipe because there isn't a tailpipe. No fuel is being burned. No hydrocarbons are being burned, and therefore there are no emissions. And so over time, and it'll take a long time because it's taken us decades to create the mess that we're in, so it's not going to happen overnight, but over time the quality of the air in our cities will improve if more people drive electric vehicles, especially people who only use their vehicle to do their commute to the park and ride, or only use their vehicle to do their daily commute to work. Now the second thing is that electric vehicles will do that will be good for the environment would be to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. There are two bits of folklore which I have not been able to establish the veracity or otherwise of that relate to the oil supply in Australia. One says that at any given point we only have 10 days of reserve of oil, and if there were some international incident or breakout of hostilities or some interruption to the supply chain and we were not able to get oil, then after 10 days we would be out of oil and basically the country would come to a standstill. Now, I've not been able to prove whether that is true or not. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm saying I have not been able to find out. The second claim is that we have reserves of oil, but they are held in the United States. Again, I have not been able to establish whether that is a fact or isn't. I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I'm saying I cannot establish that to be fact. Now, in the case of the first, if we only have 10 days worth of oil and there were to be an outbreak of hostility somewhere, or there were to be a problem with the Suez Canal like when the ship got stuck in it a couple of years ago, or some other problem on the shipping routes from where our oil comes from to how it gets to Australia, then we could be in serious trouble if that supply line was blocked. I'm not saying it is or will be, but I'm saying we have to always plan for the worst and hope for the best. Now, in the second scenario, if it is the case that we have reserves of oil and they are held in the United States, I think we've discovered in the last few days that the relationship that we once had with the United States is very different from the one we are going to have, at least for the next 4 years. And whilst we might say that in 4 years' time there'll be somebody else in charge, this is not a discussion about politics, it's merely to face the reality of what's happening to us now and what is potentially the scenario for the next 4 years. We have a government in Washington that is wanting to use things like the Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme, or the PBS as we call it, and our biosecurity rules in relation to imported foodstuffs from other countries, wants to use those as bargaining chips in a tariff war where Australia is penalised because we sell more to the United States than we buy from them. Now, our governments have said at the moment, or our government and our alternate government, the opposition, have said at the moment, the biosecurity laws are not for negotiation and the PBS is not for negotiation, and good on for saying so, but would the government in Washington say at some stage, well, we hold your oil reserves and we're not going to release them to you, or allow the ships that are being loaded with them to leave our ports until such time as we've struck an agreement on whatever it is that is a bee in a bonnet of the government in Washington at the moment. Now, I'm not saying those things will happen, but it's like what I just said a moment ago, we should always plan for the worst and hope for the best. Plan for the worst case scenario and hope for the best. So reducing our dependence on foreign oil would be a good thing for the environment because we would be burning less hydrocarbons and it would make us a more self-reliant nation. So if you were thinking of buying an electric vehicle and you were saying to yourself, I will help to make the air cleaner in the city that I live in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, wherever, or I will reduce the country's dependence on foreign oil, then you could give yourself a pat on the back and say, jolly good, well done, so on and so forth. But that is not to say that electric vehicles are by definition green, clean vehicles. Let's think about the construction of an electric vehicle and compare it with the construction of a combustion engine vehicle in this sense. the body of those two vehicles is made from the same materials, steel. Steel is made using large amounts of energy. In Australia, where if there are any steelworks that still operate, those steelworks operate basically from coal-fired power stations. Yes, we are transitioning to renewable energy, but we have not made 100% transition to renewable energy, and I'm not sure when in the near future that will be, if in fact it happens at all. If there's a change of government, it may not happen at all. We may have to wait for nuclear energy 20 or 30 years from now. So the manufacturing of the body, things like the tyres, the wheels, the upholstery, the steering wheel, those components that all cars share, whether they're electric or combustion-powered vehicles, they're all made, the processes of making them are all the same. And so there are emissions at every step of the way there that have to be factored in to say, well, these are the net total or the gross total of emissions that are created in the production of this one particular car that you are about to buy. Now, in the case of electric vehicles, there are some separate issues to do with the production of the electric motors, which I acknowledge don't burn any hydrocarbons, but nevertheless, those electric motors have to be made somewhere. They have to be made in factories. They have to be made using raw materials like steel and copper and so on. And that steel has to be made somewhere. The copper has to be mined somewhere, extracted somewhere and processed into the form that can be used in the vehicle. And every step of that process uses energy, and that energy creates emissions of some sort or the other. And those emissions again have to be factored in as to the total emissions that are part of the production of the vehicle. The biggest factor in the production of an electric vehicle and the biggest cost is the battery. Now, in some cases, some manufacturers make their own batteries. BYD, for example, they are a major Chinese manufacturer. They make a lot of electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids, and they make their own batteries. They make what is called a blade battery. It's believed to be a bit safer than the slab skateboard battery, as it's called, and a bit more energy efficient. But nevertheless, it has to be made somehow. So in the process of making a battery, whether it's made in-house by BYD or it's made by LG or some other company, it has to be made somehow. There are minerals that have to be mined and extracted to allow for that battery to be made. Now, the company that makes the car, for example, BYD or Kia or whoever, they might legitimately say, we have no interest in the mine that mines the lithium or the manganese or the cobalt or whatever other mineral it is that is extracted from somewhere in the earth to make this battery. And they may be correct in saying that. You can maybe go back in the company's register and look at all the internecine companies that are part of the BYD group or the Kia group or whatever it is, and find that in fact they don't have any connection to the company in Africa or wherever it is that runs the lithium mine. But, and this is the big important point, because BYD or Kia or Geely or whoever else it is that makes electric vehicles is a big supplier, a big customer of the lithium mine. They have the potential to influence that mine by saying, well, either you meet our standards or we'll find somewhere else to get our product from. Now, I'm sure the companies do this kind of thing on a regular basis in regard to the price of the resource that they're buying. They say to the company that owns the mine, that mines the lithium, we are prepared to pay X dollars per tonne for your lithium. The company says, well, that's not enough, we need X dollars plus Y to make a profit. And no doubt there's a back and forth until they agree on a price, and that price is paid. But since the company making the car is the major customer and the major consumer of that lithium or whatever other mineral it is, they are in a powerful position to influence other behaviours as well as the price of the product. They can say to the mining company, well, we don't expect to see children working in this mine, for example. Child labour is not acceptable to us, and we will not buy lithium from you or whatever mineral it is from you if there are children working in your mines. And we will send inspectors, we will send people from our company to verify that. And we will talk to people in the local towns and villages about that. If you can tell all the children to stay home on the day that we come, we'll talk to the local villages and we'll find out if there are any children working there. And if there are, we will not buy from you if that's the case. So they have the power to say, they have the power in terms of their purchasing power to influence the labour that is used to extract that chemical and mineral. They have the same power in regard to overall workplace health and safety. That is to say, there are workplace health and safety laws that we say are minimum standards that we expect to find in Australian factories, in Australian mines, in Australian workplaces. And okay, every country has its own workplace health and safety standards, but the ones that we have here in developed Western nations, we ought to be able to at least have some influence on the workplace health and safety laws that apply in less developed countries that provide us with the raw materials for the product that we make. So again, referring to BYD or Geely or Leapmotor or whoever it is, Cherry or Kia or whoever it is that's buying lithium, they have the capacity to influence the workplace health and safety laws in the country where the mineral is obtained. They equally have a power to influence industrial legislation in terms of hours worked, breaks, holidays, rest periods, a number of hours in a day, and so on. If they were to look at their own labour laws, if we look at labour laws in Australia and say, well, the general work day now is about 7.5 hours. We have a break for morning tea or whatever you call it in your workplace. We have a break for lunch. It'd be reasonable to say that the workers in the mine, in wherever it is, should be given similar treatment. They should have a clearly defined work day that's 7 or 8 hours. They should be paid a reasonable hourly rate. They should have reasonable breaks for lunch and mid-morning snack, whatever you want to call it, and things like toilet breaks and stuff like that are just part of the process. Holidays should be in keeping with what we think are reasonable standards, bearing in mind, of course, they may be different in that country. They may not have 4 weeks annual leave. They might have only 2 weeks or a week or something or other. And yes, we accept, or perhaps we don't accept, but we understand that maybe enforcing those laws might push the cost of the item up. But if we're going to look at our electric vehicle and say, well, I bought an electric vehicle because I wanted to do my bit for the environment, and I know when I drive it I'm going to be part of a movement that results in cleaner air in our cities, and I'm going to be part of a movement that results in less dependence on foreign oil, but I'm also going to be part of a movement that says in the country where the minerals are extracted from the ground to make the battery for my car, the workers are treated properly. There are no children working in the mines. The workers are paid decent wages. They're allowed decent breaks during their daily shift. They have a reasonable day's work, 7 or 8 hours, as I would expect to work in my job. And I'm satisfied that the company that I buy this vehicle from has done things that are within its power and within its scope to make some of those things possible, or at least make some improvements in the standards of work, the standards of safety, the provision of use of children as labour and so on in the workplaces where the minerals that are needed to make the battery in my vehicle. The company that I bought the car from has done everything within its power. So instead of just paying lip service and saying, well, yes, we asked and they told us there were no slave labour, we asked them and they told us there was no child labour, we did some research of our own. We asked the right questions. We asked difficult questions. We sent people to find things out. So to return to my original point, I guess, there is nothing that human beings make or consume that is has zero impact on the environment. Electric vehicles are the same in that regard as are combustion vehicles. They have an impact on the environment. The extent of that impact can be minimised by the companies that make the cars insisting upon decent standards in the places where the minerals that they need to make the batteries in particular, decent workplace standards and so on. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you have a comment, as I said, leave it in the comments section and I will respond when I become aware of your comment. Enjoy your day, whatever it is you're doing, and I'll talk to you again when I'm making the next video